in so much as this house has been purified. That'll be a wrong. Or if the house is clean, and it is not replaced with soul and with love, then beware the danger 7 times the four which are left shall return. But for this moment there is love. This moment there is release, and that which follows the individual will come from within himself, and not from that which was here.
The first U.S. television broadcast of an exorcism. So the news crew took footage of the house and the exorcism for 2 days. While the exorcism began, almost everyone was kept in the living room. All of them were required to wear holy crosses for protection. A few news crew members, Joseph DeLuise, the Reverend William Darrell Davis, and another minister from the same church, went into the dining room to begin the ritual. They built a makeshift altar where they placed candles, a Bible, a crucifix, and the Eucharist. To start the 3.5-hour ritual, William served communion. Soon after, Joseph fell into a trance. He described these as a total relaxation of mind and body, and this was how he opened himself up to communicate with spirits. As he fell deeper into the trance, a strong gust of wind blew through the dining room. It shook the curtains and rattled the blinds, but all the windows were sealed shut. And after Joseph began speaking, he later claimed a spirit was using his vocal cords. A spirit spoke through him, mentioning a picture and a number they needed. Reverend William asked him various questions through the trance, but the answers were cryptic and didn't make much sense. All the while, Joseph held onto a holy cross and a mirror which he would wave through the air. Joseph's strategy was to show the spirit that he had no reflection, and if he had no reflection, it didn't exist. During the ritual, others heard loud slamming noises throughout the house, and a flock of birds began chirping in the front yard. They were so loud the news crew couldn't completely remove their audio from the recordings. According to Edwin, he had recorded audio on his tape recorder, and when he listened back to it later, he could hear tapping and knocking noises, plus the voice of a child saying, "Mama," but there was no children present at the exorcism. After Joseph eventually fell out of the trance, he asked William to serve the spirit communion. Then William blessed the house and gave the spirits a final warning.
So after this was released, the popularity of hauntings in general just skyrocketed, and many rewatched the news footage, and they pointed out that supposedly there's something in the doorway that people claim to be a ghost.
This past week, they said they were awakened by the sound of a woman crying. It came from the dining room, but there was no one in the house but themselves.
That was it. I don't know if you caught it. We can watch it again.
It's like in 240p right there. Like, yeah. Oh my God.
It's right in that, right by the doorway.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh, okay. You see the little pop out there?
Yeah, you see that?
Yeah. Okay.
So people claim there was no one in the room. Obviously, we can't confirm that. But yeah, people noticed that movement.
That
later.
To me, doesn't really look like an apparition or a ghost. It looks like almost like it's like a piece of cloth or something.
Yeah, something maybe hanging on the door.
Yeah, I don't know. That is interesting. I mean, could have been a better angle to get that.
Yeah.
But I guess it was just kind of happens chance they noticed that there's that movement coming through the doorway.
Yeah, I think it wasn't until like decades after the
later
fact
they're like,
someone noticed
something
that.
there.
They were there for days videotaping a ton of stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, Edwin tried to reach out to NBC and they said, yeah, we'll give you all the footage we have that's archived. And then it was all gone.
Oh, wow.
This is basically all that's left.
That's kind of fishy though, if you ask me. Like, is it just they didn't keep good record of it? They didn't save it somewhere? Or are they hiding something?
Yeah, I can't imagine that just like keeping a ton of film reels of local news would take up a lot of storage space, but you never know.
But for something as big as this, you'd think they would.
Yeah, true.
So the ministers then went through the entire house, up to the roof and through the garage, spreading blessed salt. This was meant to seal the house and prevent the spirit from returning. Joseph believed that the spirit he communicated with was an old woman who was angry because she had been scammed out of some money. He also mentioned a number he was given during the trance, and he thought it might have been the number to a safety deposit box. The segment aired multiple times, and a longer segment aired outside of Illinois. The Becker haunting case quickly grew in popularity. The news reporters kept in touch with the Beckers as the weeks passed, and the Beckers told them that they had noticed that the house was quiet for several days after the ritual. The phone stayed on the hook, nothing moved on its own, and the disembodied crying was gone, or at least that's what Edwin told the reporters. He later admitted he only told them everything was okay because he was exhausted from the media coverage, but the truth was, the paranormal activity never stopped. Edwin kept it mostly a secret, but he later told Joseph that the hauntings were still present. They could still hear the old woman crying crying and objects kept moving through the house. So Joseph would come by and bless the house every so often. When Edwin asked why the entities remained in the house, Joseph explained that exorcisms are mostly meant to banish demons. They did basically nothing against earthbound spirits. Later, when Edwin was cleaning the first floor unit, he saw the apparition of an elderly woman one last time. She sat in a wheelchair looking out the window. In silence, she looked over at him and then back out of the window. When Edwin blinked, she vanished. A few nights later, Edwin and Marcia woke up at 5 a.m. to shrieking and screaming noises. He later confessed it was only after the exorcism that he experienced a moment in the house where he was truly terrified. For the last year, he had feared for the safety of his family, but nothing had ever confronted him face to face until one night when the shrieking suddenly stopped. After a brief silence, the bedroom door swung open and their dog Holly barreled into the room and jumped on the bed. Edwin and Marcia watched as Holly lowered her head and the fur along the ridge of her back stood straight up. She showed her teeth and growled, ready to fight whatever was in the room. Edwin stared at the doorway but couldn't see anything there. Confused, the Beckers didn't know what to do, but eventually their dog settled down. The next day, Holly vanished, and they figured she ran off. As it turned out, their tenant Danny had an Afghan hound who had... Okay, well, whatever this entity that took Holly is coming for my mic apparently, because it just shut off completely. So weird. Getting creeped out now. The hell? As it turned out, their tenant Danny had an Afghan hound who he only had for 4 days, and it also had run away from the house. He let it out back so it could relieve itself when something spooked it, and the dog bolted toward the garage and hopped the back fence. Other times, the Beckers would hear the stand-up piano ring out late at night. Edwin's sister April had gifted him the piano, and it often rang out at night when no one else was around. It always played the same few notes and then fell silent. Edwin thought that his sister might have been plagued by demons, possibly before she gave him the piano. When she was young, she used Ouija boards, dabbled in the occult, and performed seances. She later had 2 children, and Edwin saw her as a strong woman, but he noticed something had slowly consumed her life. She soon lived in constant fear and could only sleep with the TV and radio on. Against his better judgment, Edwin let his sister and her family live in the first floor unit for a short period of time, and she became abusive to everyone around her, especially her husband and children. Edwin once caught her using a Ouija board in the house, so he smashed it in front of her. She then said she could see the ghost of a violent man named Henry in him. She began hearing voices and seeing the faces of ghosts superimposed on the faces of her family members. She'd also complain of nightmares where she was visited by a hooded figure. April was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and epilepsy. Over time, she became alienated from her friends and family, and she underwent treatment a few times, but nothing ever helped. She then ran off in the middle of the night with no money and none of her belongings. Edwin last heard she had joined a cult in Cicero, Illinois, and passed away many years later. His sister's experience made Edwin fear Ouija boards and the occult, especially inside his own house. Even though he was skeptical for a long time, his sister's experiences and his own personal experiences in the house made him look at the paranormal differently. Clearly, the exorcism had failed to remove the entities, so Edwin realized the only way to deal with the paranormal entities was to leave the house. He had been working 3 jobs at the time, so he saved every penny he could so they could finally leave the house. He eventually came across a different real estate opportunity, and he and Marcia finally abandoned the house. He tried to rent out the old haunted property, but all the tenants caught on to the paranormal activity and moved out. Meanwhile, Edwin's real estate agent Chuck showed the house on Campbell Street to dozens of potential buyers, but no one wanted it. When he later met with Chuck, Edwin finally confessed that the place was haunted, and the potential buyers could probably sense there was something off about the property. But then Chuck got excited and asked if it was actually haunted. Edwin didn't realize his agent was into the paranormal. Apparently, Chuck and his wife were obsessed with the paranormal and regularly held seances in their home. Seeing that Edwin's own realtor might be interested in buying the place, he told Chuck to call up his tenant Danny if he wanted confirmation that the place was haunted. Danny told him about all the strange things that had happened in the house. And once he got off the phone, Chuck told Edwin that he wanted to buy the property for himself, but he had no money. Edwin was so desperate to get rid of the property that he offered Chuck a quitclaim deed to quickly transfer over the property. It only cost $10. And Edwin also left him whatever was still in the house. Even after Edwin got rid of the property, the media kept following him, and tabloids kept reporting false stories about him. One story even reported about flying pig heads soaring through the house. In response, Edwin and Marcia delisted their names in the phone books and cut themselves off from all reporters. They've still experienced the paranormal in different houses they lived in since then, but none have been as bad as the house on Campbell Street.
Light out, everybody.